right. Welcome back, Human Services. We're going to start up again. And we have with us for our next witness, Seth Gleason, who is a Charterhouse resident. And he is on Zoom. So I see that Charterhouse is here. And is Seth with you? There you go.
Yes. So we'll switch places. There we go.
Good morning.
Good morning, Seth. Welcome to the General Housing Committee and the Human Services Committee. As you know, it's Homelessness Awareness Day, and we've asked for you to come in and share your story. So welcome.
Won't take too much of your time. I guess, do I read off the statement or can I just talk?
You can do either, but if you have a statement to read, please share it with us.
Okay. So crib notes. Before I became homeless, I had compassion for that. I just never thought that I would be in that position. Then once I was, it turned my whole world around, and I see the other side of it. There's a lot of stigma against people that are homeless. They think that either you're dirty or you have, just no direction in your life or anything like that. But my experience was I was hanging out. I had no job and no house, and I was hanging out at a gas station in my local town. And if people would come in and out and see me all day, and one day some guy said, what are you hanging around for? And don't you have another place to go? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm jobless and homeless. And they looked at me and they said, well, you don't look homeless. So that type of imagery that I knew from them was, something you see, on the street of New York or in movies or stuff like that. So it kind of fired me up to, try to get information out there to say, it doesn't have a certain definition of what a homeless person should be or look like or anything else. A situation can turn in your life and boom, it's one paycheck, away from being without anything. I think that there should be some, as you all saw, educational pamphlets or whatever to the public. They don't know the statistics of people. They don't know what it actually looks like. Here at Charter, we have a lot of opportunities to expand on our life. We get, help with jobs. We have health insurance, just to make sure that that's all set up before we can go and potentially get our own house. So that those parts are all taken care of. I'm really nervous, sorry. Yeah, it's just disheartening to know that you at one point in your life in that position, you literally you feel nothing. You feel like you can't contribute to the society, or you're not a person. At some point when I first got to Charterhouse, I was into the depression mode to not want to be alive anymore, really. There's a lot of families that, that statistic is just overwhelming to know that there's children out there too that have no place to go. And it's just, something needs to be done. It needs to be helped, One of my suggestions would be to possibly help everyone get on an even 50-50 with housing or some kind of funding that, sets people up so they don't feel so alone and scared about, you messed up, but it could be any situation that could just put you there. So that's me. There's, a lot of people look at you when you say, hey, where do you live? And I'm like, oh, I live in Charter. And they're like, oh, So it's like we don't have a disease, we just have a problem that needs to be fixed. And there's a lot of educational people, every smart people that I've met here that just one turn after another, and that's where we are. And we just need help, literally. So I guess that's my statement.
Well, Seth, thank you for sharing that. Can you actually tell the committee where Charter House is?
Oh, we are based in Middlebury. It's a really good place, although some people have been here for years and you can't get any help. And yeah, I want to help everybody, so even myself, but make sure that they're on track before I am. But
Well, no, thank you for sharing your story, Seth, and I'm glad you were able to find this level of help and hope that you continue on your journey in a safe and healthy way.
I appreciate that, and more people saying that even helps during the day. Is anything I could do, or can we talk, or yeah, it helps a lot just for state of minds and hearts. So.
Well, it takes a lot of courage to come and talk to us even on Zoom. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Nellie. Okay, next up we have Amanda Hilliker. Welcome, Amanda.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm a little nervous, so forgive me if my voice shakes a little bit. I haven't done this since high school.
That's okay. And just, identify, I didn't read off the title that I had here, but if you could just let us know.
My name is Amanda Hilliker. I am currently a housing advocate with Voices Against Violence in Franklin and Grand Isle County. We're a program of CVOEO. We're a domestic and sexual violence program and a member of the Vermont Network. As we're all aware, the amount of Vermonters and families experiencing homelessness is continuing to grow, while the services are decreasing. I'm here today to speak to you about what our homeless survivors are currently experiencing. In the last couple of years, we've had great success with receiving vouchers with programs such as CARES, Rapid Rehousing, the SHA, and most recently, the emergency housing vouchers. Those were aimed specifically towards homeless survivors fleeing domestic and sexual violence. Vermont received 99 of those vouchers, and they were distributed to each county based on population. Franklin and Grand Isle got 8 of those vouchers, and I'm pleased to say that we successfully housed all 8 of those. The vouchers that were not utilized in time by other counties were then put in a pool and were able to be applied for on a first-come, first-served basis. To date, we have utilized 4 more of those vouchers and currently have 3 more pending applications. That's 12 households that are now safe and stably housed. This funding allows Vermonters and families to attain safety and thrive. While programs like these are a huge part of housing stability, the lack of housing stock and safe, affordable housing is steadily decreasing. As of yesterday, over 1,900 households were added to the Section 8 waitlist. That waitlist is closing at 4:30 p.m. on January 23rd. Only 500 vouchers are going to be released, with a voucher attrition of 15 per month. Those vouchers will be aimed at households that are currently housed and facing housing instability, and not towards those that are currently homeless. The Homes Family Housing Voucher Project will have 100 vouchers for households that will be for homeless individuals with children. That's 600 vouchers total, and not enough available housing. On top of that, recipients are only given 120 days to secure a unit, or they lose that voucher. 120 days when housing is already so limited is extremely stressful to a survivor that's already experiencing so much. Most of our survivors struggle with transportation, and in our rural area, the public transportation is non-existent. There is 1 bus that goes in and out of Franklin County twice a day. The lack of childcare also plays a role into households being able to self-sustain. How can they work if there's no childcare availability? And if they can find childcare, how can they pay for it if it's 90% of their paycheck? My position works directly with folks accessing our emergency housing program. And currently we have only one hotel that will work with us in our funding. That one hotel is also being utilized by Economic Services, which also makes our availability to emergency housing also non-existent. Most of the time we have to safety plan with survivors and refer out to other counties and hoping that they can access emergency housing elsewhere. But 90% of the time the survivor chooses to stay where they're at, which also leads to other increased safety concerns. Survivors in Vermont are being murdered by their partners in their home. DV is the leading cause of homelessness for women and children, as well as people on the gendered spectrum. Housing accessibility is a direct response to preventing this lethality. While COVID-19 was detrimental and caused its own chaos, it also helped shine the light on the homelessness that many Vermonters are currently experiencing. It also helped open the door to funding that funded such vouchers like CARES and the emergency housing vouchers. Programs like ours benefited from extra funding that helped fund more food cards, gas cards, cell phones, safety planning like cameras for their apartments, and transportation needs. These items might sound small to some, but quite often also meant the safety of a survivor and their children. This funding is coming to a close and is going to create a very big void that most programs are not going to be able to fill. I come to you today not only as an advocate, but also a survivor that has experienced homelessness after fleeing domestic violence. These programs and funding allowed me to maintain the safety of my children and the stability to not only go to school, but work and open a business that has been open almost 5 years. And I now work for the very agency that helped me access those programs. After 7 years of being on the Section 8 program, I was able to give up my voucher and I was able to purchase my first home. These programs and this funding are not only detrimental, but they can lead to the success of many survivors and lead to a happy life for many children. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my testimony.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
And again, good luck. I thank you for sharing and we're here to receive your story and it's a privilege for us to hear it. So
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
no need to be nervous in our committee. I know it's a lot for people, for first timers, but welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
And just a reminder for folks, if you have electronic copies of your testimony, please share it with either through Martin or anybody else to get it to Ron so that we can post it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, next up, we have Captain Partlow, who is the Housing and Community Development Manager at the Family Center of Washington County. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to all of you. This is new for some of you, right? Some of you are new here this last couple of weeks.
To the building.
Yes. So hope you have a good session. Good introduction. My name is Kathy Partlow. I'll say again for the record, I work at the Family Center of Washington County and I manage our housing programming there. I'm here as part of my testimony today to tell you a bit about housing partnership and how it tends to work in our community and how I think we've been pretty successful at it. And in hopes that you can help us to do and to promote more of that across the state. So our organization offers several intensive case management programs that serve pregnant and parenting families who are homeless at the time of program entry. We assist them with becoming housed, hopefully, ideally, and some of that happens because we have these housing partnerships. To better serve our participants in 2015, we entered into a partnership with Downstreet Housing and Community Development, and I'm sure that name is not foreign to any of you in the room. I'm here to talk to you again about successful housing partnerships, why they're needed, and what's needed to sustain them over time. Our housing partnership is successful because we have a shared commitment to serve our community and those experiencing homelessness. Downstreet's mission is to provide affordable housing, and our mission is to house this population, and our mission to house this population are really a perfect fit. That's not to say that these partnerships don't take work, because they take an incredible amount of work, both to get off the floor and to keep sustained over time. We've engaged in a mutually beneficial memorandum of understanding that is clear regarding each partner's responsibilities. This keeps our individual organizational roles in check and provides all of us with an understanding of where our desires may run up against either programmatic or organizational barriers. In some cases, we can alleviate those barriers, and in others, we need to acknowledge that we're all doing the best we can with the constraints that we have to effectively serve the most families possible. Downstreet provides housing with a heart, and we endeavor to provide services in the same manner. In one instance, we had a family of 3, a mother and 2 children, housed in a Downstreet unit. This family was succeeding, paying rent on time, keeping a nice apartment, being good neighbors, starting to save money, working on education. And then suddenly something changed. And that was actually first noticed, despite us being in there quite often, by the property manager, who reached out to us because of the partnership that we have. We then engaged in a conversation with the client that we were working with, and were able to offer the support that they needed to get through what was luckily a bump in the road. And so we were able to connect them to community, connect them to service providers, and they were able to recover from this bump in the road with a renewed sense of community. And a boost in self-esteem that really comes from helping yourself through a tough situation. This could have turned out really differently if we hadn't had the partnership that we have with this housing provider. And we all can imagine, and you're going to hear today about other instances where things that are a lot more drastic happen to individuals and families who are actively in housing. And Sarah spoke earlier to folks that we've rehoused, right? Folks that have been homeless, became housed, had a bump in the road that maybe they didn't as successfully maneuver and ended up homeless again. This definitely happens to both individuals and families, and these housing partnerships are key to helping to alleviate some of those issues before they become issues again. And sometimes things don't work out, as I just mentioned, despite everyone's best efforts. This is when the ideals of our true partnership comes into play. A housing partner takes on the liability of sometimes taking a chance on a tenant that might not look as good on paper as others. Maybe they don't have the credit score. Maybe they don't have as many references. Maybe they're a young parent who's never entered into a lease before, so there really are no housing references. They do this because they believe in the partnership, in second chances, and that people can change. And still, sometimes it really doesn't work out. When that happens, our risk mitigation funds, and Sarah mentioned that there's a new program coming into play that you all, I'm sure, helped to finance over the last session. Our risk mitigation funds that we have through our programming have proven to help ease the financial burden on the housing providers. That can sometimes be key in this work. The ability to say to a houser, we're financially in this with you, allows them to potentially take that chance where they might not otherwise do it. The ability to know that there's a service provider on the other end of a phone that can help to respond if something's going wrong. Do we always have the answers? Can we always help? Maybe not, but it's somebody in the work with you. These funds are limited, and I know the statewide expansion will be fantastic, but I also want to say that the funds are likely still limited. And I just want to draw to your attention that I think that that is key to building new partnerships, not only with affordable housing providers like we have with Downstreet, but with private housing providers who might be more willing to enter into agreements with the likes of the Family Center of Washington County in order to work on this problem as a community. We're community service providers, those experiencing homelessness, allies and housers talking to you today. We're out here every day working to help the most vulnerable among us. We do this because we place value in every human being, no matter the circumstances they find themselves in. And in an ideal that is that, and in the ideal that housing is in fact a human right. We know you hear about many issues facing the state, and the job that you face balancing priorities and budgets is grueling. We're here to inform you and ask you to prioritize this work. We ask you to incentivize all housing providers to work with us in some way, to continue to fund and expand services for those experiencing homelessness, and to please reach out to us for information and ideas. We have lots of them, as I'm sure you know. Do not forget that we're all in this together, those that are in need and those of us who can do something to meet that need. We too are in a partnership that needs to rely on honest and consistent communication, role definition, and trust. With the right investments in housing and services, homelessness in Vermont will be brief and non-recurring. I am hopeful that due to partnerships of all kind, that there will be little future need for homelessness awareness days. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to just show our committees the intersection of what our committees work. Your designated agency is Washington?
We are not the designated.
Okay.
We are a designated agency here for early childcare. In Washington County, Capstone is our lead agency. So I just want to make sure we've got the separate terms. Capstone is the lead agency for, say, HOP grant purposes, right? They're the lead agency for that.
I just wanted to, for the housing committee, I just wanted you to see how connected, how the strings go. And I think for human services, they know the agencies, the designated agencies much more intimately than we do. However, here we are working with this agent. I just want to take that opportunity to
Absolutely
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ken.
you.
Thank you, Ken.
All right, next up I have online Stephanie. And Stephanie, do I pronounce your last name as it's written or is there a different stress on it? I see your name, Stephanie. Are you still there?
Sorry, we were just having the discussion about designated agency, Chair Stevens.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Oh, I was moving to the next witness.
Oh, okay, somebody said you wanted me, so sorry.
No, not yet.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I don't see Stephanie, are you there?
If so, you're muted.
All right, I'm gonna, until I see some stuff moving on Zoom, I am going to move to Marie Lennon. Marie, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Marie. Welcome to the General Housing Committees, General Housing Committee and the Human Services Committee. We have you, you are a member of the VCEH board, and you're here to testify about your service on the board, but also as your lived experience. Welcome to the committees.
Thank you very much, and I thank you for your time. My name is Marie Lennon, and I live in Middlebury, Vermont. I'm going to give you a little background about what sent my life into a spiral downstream. In 2014, my mom passed from dementia. That was in December. In March of 2015, my dad passed away from cancer. In May of 2015, my late husband passed away from cancer. So within 5.5 months, I lost the three most important people in my life. After that, I guess you could say my life sort of went into a downhill spiral. In March of 2016, I found myself homeless with nowhere to go. So I ended up at the Charter House here in Middlebury. This was a very terrifying experience for me, because being homeless was something that I was not familiar with. I never had to worry about it when my dad was when I was young. My dad had a good job. I never had to worry about having a roof over my head. Never had to worry about having food on the table. I was at the charter house for 2 months until they closed on April 15th. At that point, they were only open half a year, and then they opened up again in October. So after April 15th, I went up to the John Graham shelter in Virginia. All the staff there was so very helpful and supportive. And I was very grateful for that because I had no other support system. I have a sister that lives in California and another one that lives in Illinois, but I really didn't have any other support system. So the staff up at the John Graham shelter helped me with finding an apartment through a voucher through the Vermont Housing Authority. So in October of 2016, I moved into my apartment. And I am one of the successes to where I am still in that apartment to this day. But as somebody said earlier, that doesn't happen all the time. People come in and out of homelessness all the time. In the beginning of fiscal year 2022, there were approximately 3,000 households that were experiencing homelessness, with over 1,000 in Chittenden County. The Charter House Coalition at the beginning of this pandemic was absolutely amazing. They served meals to their clients, plus meals, 3 meals a day to the clients that were staying in the local hotels. So they were making almost, I would say, over 900 meals a day between all three meals, and they pulled that together, and it worked. It wasn't easy, but it worked. Currently, there are 1,300 homeless that are in the DCF transitional housing program, and the GA housing has over 500 adults and 168 children. This is a horrid number, especially these kids just, I just can't imagine what they're going through. And mental health situations with children that are homeless must be absolutely astounding. As of April 1st of this year, the transitional housing program will end and be leaving many of these households remaining unsheltered. There are some that are considered quote unquote chronically homeless that will stay in the transitional housing program, but others will need to apply again for the general assistance for the hotel program. And again, we don't know how long that'll be able to be workable money-wise. Rental subsidies are a huge part of making housing truly affordable. And the vouchers that these nonprofits have are so helpful. But right now, we don't have enough vouchers to cover for everybody that is homeless. The goal that I feel for this fixing the housing problem is to plan for a future in which homelessness in Vermont is brief, rare, and non-reoccurring. I would like to leave you with one thought. Housing is a human right and not a privilege.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you for sharing your story and your advocacy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Stephanie is back. Stephanie, can you help me with your last name? Is it Vandal or Vandal?
Vandal. Vandal is accurate.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming back.
No problem. Thank you for having me here today. So my name is Stephanie Vandal. I am a landlord liaison at Springfield Supported Housing in Springfield, Vermont. I started out as a client in 2016 as my family was evicted from our housing and we had nowhere to go. So I ended up in a motel in Rockingham, Vermont with my children, and I was supported through SSHP to secure stable housing and maintain that housing for 2.5 years after until I moved into new housing. I then applied for a VISTA position with supported housing, which at the end of my year, I was offered an intake position. And then when the landlord liaison position became available, I applied for that and was hired into this role. So what a landlord liaison does within the community is I do outreach to area landlords that are unfamiliar with our services and what we offer their tenants as far as financial support and case management. I also connect folks with resources in the area. So there are some programs to help landlords renovate their buildings to be habitable and able for folks to live there, because there are some landlords that have buildings that they're not livable. One of the big things that I've been working on is being a direct contact for our agency for landlords looking to fill available apartments. I've had a few landlords that reach out to me directly when they have an availability, and it's made it so that we're able to streamline fitting the right person with the right landlord. And just as an example, I had a client that was in the motels for 2 years due to a lack of income. And one of my landlords did reach out to me saying she had an apartment that this person would be able to afford comfortably. And now that person is housed. So that is one of our biggest projects, is streamlining those services so that landlords call me directly when they have an available unit, which is pretty infrequently. Most of the time I'm only available of 2 or 3 within our district, which is Southern Windsor County and Northern Windham County. So I do have one landlord that reached out to me, and at the time we had an elderly couple in the office who was living in their vehicle. And I mean, these folks were well into their 80s, fighting cancer and needed surgery. They could not get that surgery until they were stably housed. So I did connect them to this landlord, and within 2 weeks, one of the folks was able to have their surgery because they were finally stably housed. They had been homeless for 6 years. It was just perfect circumstances. And I told the couple that, I'm like, this does not happen. I do not find housing for people this quickly. I'm glad I was able to, because now this person will be able to live a few more years comfortable and healthy. It's something I witness a lot, is folks that are unable to have medical procedures due to a lack of healthy housing. Because unfortunately, not all of the motels are considered healthy housing. Some of them do really well, but some of them struggle. I also work with Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust on their rental rehab program. I facilitate filling these rental rehab units, and am a point of contact for Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. And let's see. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Bear with me.
Take your time.
I do connect landlords to area resources like VHIP, which is the Vermont Home Improvement Project or Program, excuse me, to get them funding to repair apartments that have been destroyed by some tenants, because that is frequent. I was excited to hear about this landlord risk pool that will make some landlords feel more confident renting to people. And our ultimate goal is for me to field phone calls for all area landlords for available rentals. I have created documents to track applications for our homeless population so that I can then connect them with landlords that are a suitable fit. And then I think that's it.
Well, thank you for sharing. It's as long as funding still exists and can be continued to be pushed out from here to you, to organizations like yours. I'm really appreciative of the fact that we are starting programs like a landlord liaison, or trying to beef them up so that they're more effective in finding units. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and congratulations on your journey so far.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure, our pleasure, our privilege. Thank you. Next up, we have Jenny Davis. What's that?
We just heard from Jenny.
No, we didn't hear from Jenny yet. We heard from Marie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, Jenny, you are the Family Outreach and Assessment Coordinator at Champlain Valley School District. Welcome to our committee, to the General Housing Committee and the Human Services Committee for Homelessness Awareness Day. Thank you for coming in.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am just going to read off of an assessment report that I for my role. It's a I've been in this role almost exactly a year. It's the Champlain Valley School District, which is Heinsberg, Shelburne, Charlotte, Williston, St. George, and CVU, which is the high school for that region. And it's a unique role in the state. I think it's the only housing support position in the entire state that's school-based. So that's a little intro. And it is currently funded through grant funding. I want to say COVID-related grant funding. The funding does run out for it at the end of this school year. We're trying to figure that out for next year, but that is not what I'm here to talk about. Anyway, so I will just be reading off my assessment. Last February, I took on the role of Family Outreach and Assessment Coordinator, a newly created position by the Champlain Valley School District to support students and families experiencing homelessness or housing instability. There were two critical reasons for the decision to fund this position: the results of the McKinney-Vento data collected by the schools documenting all unhoused families attending schools in the district, and the growing concerns of school staff who were seeing the number of unhoused and housing insecure students and families in the district skyrocket. The rise in housing instability and homelessness for students and families is not always reflected in the McKinney-Vento documentation, nor in the annual HUD point-in-time counts conducted in communities across the country. There are many additional cases that are not accounted for a variety of reasons. Those reasons include families who are living in doubled up living arrangements and the school isn't aware. I just want to say really quickly, the McKinney-Vento is essentially legislation around supporting homeless students and families so they can remain. It's about school continuity and providing resources to students and families who are homeless. Anyway, so some of the reasons that some of these homeless families are not documented: families who are living in doubled up living arrangements and the school isn't aware, families in uninhabitable housing who are concerned about reporting their housing conditions for fear of having no other housing options in case they're forced to move. Families who are afraid to report their housing because they think it will lead to children being removed from their homes. Families who are at risk of losing housing and don't let the school district know because they are unaware of the resources available to them. Families who are at risk of losing housing and don't let the school district know because they don't want their children to have to change schools. McKinney-Vento supports that. And then feelings of shame or guilt around housing status resulting in them not reporting. Regardless of the reason that a school district may not be aware of families experiencing homelessness or housing instability, it is widely recognized by educators and social service professionals that being in unstable housing or being unhoused affects students and their ability to learn in profound and enduring ways. Some of these include students experiencing homelessness are likely to be chronically absent from school more than the overall student population. Students experiencing homelessness are less likely to complete high school. And I'll submit all of this in writing so you'll have the notes or the sources I cite. Among those who complete high school, students experiencing homelessness are less likely to enroll in college the year following completion when compared to all students. Students experiencing homelessness are likely to receive disciplinary action more than other students. 1 in 5 students experiencing homelessness change schools at least once during the school year. Only 51% of children who are homeless met statewide standards in reading in grades 3 through 8 on a national basis. 48% of students who are homeless met statewide standards in math on a national basis. Children who are homeless are recognized to have twice the rate of learning disabilities than the general population. Children who are homeless are 4 times as likely to show developmental delays, and children who are homeless have 3 times the rate of emotional behavioral disorders than children who have stable housing. The reasons for being unhoused are innumerable, but are also as unique as each family. What is not unique are the consequences of homelessness or housing instability on children. Every single child in these families is experiencing the unparalleled trauma that results from precarious housing or enduring homelessness. Breaking free from the cycle of poverty begins with a good education. Education cannot happen when a child is living with the constant anxiety and stress caused by an unstable housing situation. And then I'm just going to talk about a little bit of the data that from this assessment that I did over the past year in this role. So there are a total of, about 4,100 students in the Champlain Valley School District. I'm not sure the exact number of families, but that's the number of students. So the total number of families referred to receive housing support services was 56. That represents 105 students in those families. 5 18-year-olds were referred. So those are 18-year-olds who are not part of a family, they were living independently. This role was able to prevent 4 evictions. Among those families, 13 new Section 8 vouchers were obtained. 9 families or individuals transitioned into permanent stable housing from housing instability or from an imminent threat of housing loss. And 18 families or households transitioned into permanent stable housing from being unhoused or living in an emergency shelter or transitional housing, hotel or motel. So out of the 56 families that
Oh, Jenny, we lost your voice.
No.
So if you look at the total numbers, it's 56 families, or it's 105 students, 56 families out of 4,100 total students. It's about 2.5% of all students reported being housing insecure or homeless. And if you look at that another way, it's 1 out of every 39 students reports housing instability. So that's a pretty significant number. And then this data only represents the the Champlain Valley School District, which is one school district within the entire, within Chittenden County and then within the state. So I don't know if we can exactly extrapolate the data, but I would say it's fairly telling. Let's see. And I just also wanted to add that there was a recent New York Times article about students and families who are experiencing homelessness. And it said that HUD's point in time count, which is like the annual count of homeless families, found that there was 53,692 parents and children experiencing homelessness on a single night. This is in the entire country. But the Department of Education on the same night, using McKinney-Vento data, counted 1.4 million school-aged children who were homeless or housing insecure on the same night. So I feel that connecting to families through the school is sometimes a more direct connection. I think that is all I'm gonna say, but I have more written, but it's a lot and I'll just submit it, so.
Thank you, Jenny. And if you can submit that to us electronically so we have it for the record, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we have 3 more witnesses listed here for this morning. Kim Annitzberger. Welcome. Did I get it?
You got it.
All right, thank you. Welcome to General Housing and the Human Services Committees.
Thank you. Hi, so like you said, my name is Kim Annitzberger. I am the executive director of the Lamoille Community House, which is a small seasonal shelter nestled in Hyde Park, Vermont. I'm also the co-chair of the Lamoille Valley Housing and Homelessness Coalition, which is one of those 11 local coalitions that Sarah Phillips talked about at the beginning. I've been in my role for almost 3 years and in the field for about 5 years. I've met hundreds of beautiful, valuable people that have been left behind by our systems of care, and it breaks my heart. I see our system of care as a series of nets, kind of like stacked one above the other, with holes progressively getting smaller in the descending levels. The nets near the top have big holes, intended to only catch those with an implied larger value. As people fall, as they face challenges in their lives, the nets start to catch some people, but allow others to fall through. As the person keeps falling net after net, the holes being just not quite small enough to stop them from falling again, they end up at the last net, the one with the tightest stitches and the smallest holes, hanging just a few feet above the ground, shelters. But even shelter nets have holes, meaning sometimes we aren't equipped to catch everyone, and people end up bouncing from shelter to shelter, desperately seeking a net that will catch them, doing what they can to survive the best way they know how, and ultimately end up outdoors. They've fallen through every net that we, as a system, have set up to catch them. These nets that we've set up are here to keep people safe, cared for, and alive. At least that's what we hope for. That's what we intend, but it's not always the reality. The reality is that these nets, our systems of care, are inequitable and inadequate. Our country and state were founded in white supremacy, and the systems that we work within still operate under those intentions, which means we determine people's value based on their race, class, gender, and abilities. In order to make any change, we need to first recognize how our cultural thinking might have influenced prior decision makers, and then make a commitment to ending that cycle of thinking. Not doing so perpetuates a system created to oppress those living in poverty, and there's no progress within that system. I'm a strong believer that no one person is to blame for their homelessness. People are homeless because our systems don't catch them when they fall. And dare I say, sometimes our systems even push people down. Think of things like the benefits cliff, or a lengthy, almost impossible disability application, or housing disparities among our BIPOC community. Our systems were created by those who benefit from people being stuck in poverty. The fact that we have record numbers of people experiencing homelessness is not a surprise. It's a result of a system that benefits from the oppression of certain groups. We need a system that will be accountable and responsible for fixing these issues. Right now, our systems turn to shelter providers to provide a life-saving service for people who have no other options, since every other net was made to avoid catching them. Shelters are asked to provide these services with less funding than it takes to do the actual work. When homeless shelters are asked to leverage 30% or more of our operating budgets every year, I have a really hard time seeing that as an efficient use of our resources. We are providing a service that meets our vulnerable Vermonters' basic needs for survival. We are literally keeping people alive at the very least. We are providing a service that is needed because our systems don't allow for everyone to be helped. We need to think about where the responsibility for funding our programs lie. Most our donations are $100 or less. Why is it the responsibility of medium to low income families to make sure the shelter's lights are on? The responsibility lies with the system that created the issue. It's not the fault of anyone here today that these systems are this way, but it is our responsibility to recognize that they are, be accountable for the results they've produced, and make decisions that support a better system of care. A step in that direction is fully funding shelter providers because they are providing a life-saving service. We also need better funding for service providers in related fields. When our local agencies providing housing counseling, housing retention, and other important case management services are underfunded, it impacts our shared clientele drastically. We have unsupported and burnt out case managers with unmanageably large caseloads, wait lists for our clients, and high turnover rates. This then creates an instability for those we serve, which impacts their ability to make progress towards their goals, resulting in them staying in our system of care longer. As more people enter the system and not many are moving out of it, the problem worsens and snowballs for the case managers and the clients. Providing inadequate funding is not only disrespectful to the people on the ground doing the work, it's extremely harmful and dismissive to those that rely on these services. I see our unhoused population as an untapped resource with so much potential. The people I have met in my years of working in this field are some of the smartest, most resourceful and giving people I've ever met. I can't imagine how much they might be able to contribute to our workforce, economy, and community wellness if they were given the opportunity. If they had just been allowed to be caught by that first net. We need to invest in this population. Our shelter had a house meeting recently where it was brought up that things didn't feel fair when it came to the upkeep and tidying of the shared spaces. The group worked together to create a new way of addressing chores that they all felt really good about. Receiving input from our shelter guests on how our shelter should run is so important. It tells our guests that we value their opinions and experiences, that we value them as people. This is the kind of thing I would love to pour more resources into. Program development informed by shelter guests' feedback, staff training opportunities, better service provision, and enhanced collaboration with partner agencies. When we spend our valuable and limited resources on fundraising in order to just keep our doors open, we're telling people that the people that we serve that less than adequate attention and programming is what they deserve. Proper funding means an investment in this population, and more important, it's a decision that comes from the belief that these people have value. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for your work and your service. And as you mentioned, with everybody as burned out as they are, for sticking with it. Thank you. Next up, we have here in 3D, we have Robert Little, who is the Director of Community Development at Rural Edge up in the Northeast Kingdom.
Yes, thank you. And it's great to be here in person. I will say before I start reading, I'm very comfortable in this room right now because I'm flanked by two people who I know personally. So Representative Partly, Representative LaBounty, my own, thank you so much for running, for congratulations. And I'm so happy you're doing this work. And
thank you.
It's just so great to see you both. It's been a while.
Yes.
So as Chair Stevens said, my name is Robert Little. I'm the Director of Community Development with Rural Edge. We're the nonprofit housing developers in the Northeast Kingdom. And I also serve as the Vice Chair of the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. So you'll see me again someday soon. First, I just want to thank you and your colleagues for the transformational impact that the funding you have brought to us has had. So since CARES Act and ARPA funds have been allocated, with Rural Edge alone, we brought 74 new units online in the Northeast Kingdom. And currently we have another 132 under construction or fully funded, ready to go. That's amazing. Overall, we have 14 new projects in our pipeline for the next 4 years. So we are really proud of our accomplishments in the past several years, and I'm here today to tell you that we're not done yet. In my role at Rural Edge, I oversee our community building and engagement efforts, our SASH efforts, and our communications and advocacy work. I know that these days at the beginning of the legislative session are crazy busy with a bunch of people telling you exactly what they need. So I just want to begin now by highlighting a couple of successes we've had in the past year. In the spring of 2021, utilizing 2.3 million of VHCB homelessness relief funds, we were able to adapt the former Caledonia County Jail and Jailer's Cottage into 9 units of affordable housing in downtown St. Johnsbury, a property that we now call, as was once on the back of one of the postcards when it was a jail, the Cherry Street Hotel. All the residents came from the local coordinated entry list. While we shared the concerns that concentrating 9 households with 14 people previously experiencing homelessness could create some issues, this was not our first project that we had done with this tenant selection process. We had previously successfully, in 2020, housed 7 households totaling 27 people in St. Johnsbury using that same funding, and they are all still housed today. So it's this experience and the stories we continue to hear from our residents that give us really great hope for the future and why we're asking for more funding to keep this work going. So for example, we have Angel, a young single parent. She had lost her job, survived a complicated pregnancy, and was staying with her newborn in a cramped mobile home in Derby in midwinter with relatives with whom she did not feel her daughter was safe. When tensions boiled over, Angel took her little girl and left. They stayed at the Fairbanks Inn in St. Johnsbury, one of only 3 places in the Northeast Kingdom where the unhoused population can reside. In May of 22, she signed a lease on her new apartment at Cherry Street, bringing her from precarious housing to safe, affordable housing for her and her daughter. Here's the quote that Angel said when asked about her housing. She said, I'm afraid to be happy at times because I've had so much happen, but I feel comforted in that we have a stable place to live. That's the story. Angel's story tells us so much. We house so many people that have such great trauma in their lives, and bringing them that safe, stable housing is really what can help stabilize the rest of their lives. So to accomplish this, and knowing that the troubles that happen sometimes, we utilized our partnership with Northeast Kingdom Community Action, NECA, to have a dedicated staff member out of our office at Cherry Street to provide housing retention services to the residents of the property and across St. Johnsbury. So she works with both private and local landlords, our residents, anybody who moved in from homelessness has housing retention services. So she does that by conducting regular check-ins, service coordination with local service providers, as well as ongoing education about how to be a good tenant. I probably could have used that myself at one point in my life. This position complements Rural Edge's own eviction prevention program. The program was funded out of emergency rental assistance funds, so thank you for that. This staff member, a Rural Edge staff member, receives referrals from our property managers about tenants who are having troubles, lease violations, notices to quit, and actually follows up with them within 7 days to figure out what the situation is, work with the property manager, service coordination, all of that with the goal of housing retention, built right into our organization. So after 60 days, if the issue has not escalated, we celebrate it as an eviction prevented, and we track that. And I'm happy to report that in just 6 short months since this program started, we've seen no evictions from those who chose to work with the staff member. That's remarkable. While these successes give us great hope, there's no shortage of challenges that housing providers continue to face in housing those previously experiencing homelessness. The funding for wraparound services needed for so many are still not adequate to serve the needs we address as housing providers. When individuals disengage from their service providers or the period of wraparound services in the program that got them housed finishes, it ultimately falls on the housing providers to address the issues these residents face when they're in crisis. So we've set up that eviction prevention program to intervene, but the reality is that we are not able to address all the diverse needs that come with housing individuals previously experiencing homelessness. It's just too much work for one person. We can coordinate services and work with service providers, but if that resident is unwilling to engage with their services, we do ultimately have to evict. While we acknowledge the reality of the challenges we face, we still have great hope for the upcoming year. You might have heard that there is a federal appropriation, thanks to Senator Sanders, that is conducting a mental health pilot program for the SASH program. So this will allow Rural Edge to hire 2 part-time mental health clinicians for 1 year, likely with support from Northeast Kingdom Human Services, to address the mental health issues that our residents face, which, as you can imagine, have only increased since the pandemic. We will have dedicated staffers to intervene in times of crisis, as well as provide preventive interventions to address those issues before they become a crisis. That's the key. As a housing provider, this is important. We see the funding for the supportive services as of equal importance as the funding for the housing itself. There's no point in having housing if people can't stay in it because of issues that are oftentimes beyond their control. This does not mean, though, I'm Rural Edge, this does not mean that housing units are not of great importance. The number of new units and those in the pipeline is impressive, but we need continued funding for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, both in remaining ARPA and in general funds to continue this work. Further investing funds to bring more shelter capacity is of great importance in the Northeast Kingdom, where we have no shelter. We rely on the motels. With an additional $175 million allocated to state agencies such as VHCB, DHCD, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and others, it'll help bring those important resources that we so desperately need in this time of housing crisis. So just to conclude, I think we can look at our housing situation today. We like to use the word crisis, but I think we also need to use the word opportunity. Any efforts you make in the development of housing and the accompanying services I discussed has a direct impact on the effectiveness that Rural Edge and other housing providers in the state can have on the communities we serve as we seek to address this crisis and take advantage of the opportunity. We are not done yet. And anything that you do, any decisions you make to increase that capacity for us tells each and every Vermonter that you are not done yet either. So thank you for your time, and thank you so much for being here and for the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to be clear, for Rural Edge's perspective,
Yeah.
your stable of housing was roughly 500 before this last?
Yeah, I think it was about 600, and now we're just about at the 700 threshold. And I anticipate within the next 2 years, we'll be up closer to 850.
Yes, Greg.
Thank you. Robert,
Yeah.
in the local paper up there, Newport Daily, there was an article where Rural Edge had just purchased the former Sacred Heart High School and the residence for the sisters that staffed it. How many apartments or units do you think you can produce out of that large complex?
So we're looking at about a 10-year build out of the site. We have all of our funding in place for phase 1, which is the redevelopment of the convent. That will be 26 units of housing. We're looking at condos, so home ownership opportunity for the former high school. And then the entire field, we're looking at connecting it with Raymond Avenue in the back and creating an additional bunch of buildings. Not sure how that's going to phase out yet, but in total for that entire site, we're looking at about 200 housing units in Newport.
The first 26 coming online when?
We are hoping to be under construction in spring of 2023 with about a 12-month build out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and our last witness for today, thank you for hanging in there, Michael. Michael Redmond from the Upper Valley Haven. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, well, thank you. My colleagues are up at the State House today, and I decided to be here so I could speak with you more easily. Chair Stevens, Chair Wood, and members of the committees, my name is, for the record, is Michael Redmond, and I'm the Executive Director of the Upper Valley Haven located in Hartford. I also serve on the board of the Vermont Coalition on Homelessness and the steering committee of the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. I've been asked to be in the anchor position today in our time for testimony today, Homeless Awareness Day. My thanks to my colleagues who preceded me. They were eloquent and passionate, describing their work their agencies perform each day. I think they were also modest about their own achievements over the past 3 years during the pandemic and keeping their heads up and eyes down simultaneously, which isn't easy. Inspiring their teams, keeping their staffing in place so shelters could stay open, taking on new challenges, and programs to meet the moment. I also want to thank the people with experience of being without a home who we heard. Their voices are essential, and I have to believe that their description of their life experiences will stay with you for some time. I also want to pay tribute to our leaders in the rank and file and state government. I start with the governor and legislature for learning to be bold in vision and opportunistic in efforts to keep us healthy and productive and believing that tomorrow will emerge stronger and united. While the entire body of administrative agencies also deserve praise, I want to single out our partners in the Agency for Children and Families, Office of Economic Opportunity, and Economic Services Division, which we work with most closely for funding of the shelters, supportive housing, transitional and temporary housing, in its support for the shelter network and the people we serve who are homeless and at risk of homelessness. The agencies were creative, dedicated, tireless, understanding, and open to hearing and taking necessary actions when there are ways we believed they could do better. But here we are. You heard testimony of the challenges still ahead of all of us, still with over 1,300 households in motels through the Transitional Housing Program, which is scheduled to end on March 31st. Almost 500 households in General Assistance Emergency Housing Program. There are only some there through adverse weather conditions, and another 500 people in emergency shelters. The point in time count of people experiencing homelessness next week will likely find continued high levels never experienced prior to the pandemic. And we need to ask at this moment, and I hope this is the one question I hope you'll remember, is everything being done to avoid drastic consequences when the Transitional Housing Program ends on March 31st? 1,300 households. Some basics you'll continue to hear but are worth repeating. Shelters save lives. The solution to homelessness is more housing that is affordable, with services tailored to help people get and keep housing with connections to employment and health services especially. That is the three-legged stool. Each is important. You, the legislature, have an important role, of course, in all of this. Fortunately, after years of significant underfunding, there is a wave of funding in the pipeline for new housing. The governor has also announced his wish to see barriers to building more housing contained and state and local regulations removed. Some of that certainly involves legislation and administrative rules. I encourage you to be bold and laser focused on that. And while the COVID funding has filled that pipeline for now, we need to think about the future a few years from now when those funds will have been expended and the problem will be far from solved. More immediately, I ask you to focus on shelters and services, as some of my colleagues have said, the work that saves lives and gives people hope. This is the work you've heard my colleagues speak about so eloquently this morning. I like to focus on one issue that is most vexing to us, staffing. We're open 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. It's become increasingly challenging to find enough staff to do this essential work. And the staff that have been doing this very hard work can lose faith that there's a future for them. One direct way to change this is through providing the funding that will allow us to pay a living wage to everyone, the housing wage, to people who are helping us to provide housing to others. As we look to expand shelter beds in the state, that also requires the investment in ongoing funding for additional staff, services, and overhead costs. When ACD asks for the funds to do the job you want them to do, please listen and support the budgets that are needed. Lastly, it was almost 6 years ago to the day that the roadmap to end homelessness was submitted to multiple committees in the legislature by then AHS Deputy Secretary Paul Dragon. $40,000 was appropriated and additional matching funding was secured to complete this report by engaging the Corporation for Supportive Housing national experts. I read it again in preparation for this meeting. The analysis of the status of the problem, then recent history of addressing the problem, and recommendations for future actions have held up remarkably well. I encourage you, especially those who are new members of the legislature, to read this report, and I can put it in the chat, the link if you'd like. Much has been accomplished. The increase in supportive housing programs through the Family Supportive Housing and targeted programs to individuals with mental health conditions, pathways. The use of community-based solutions to draw together partnerships between affordable housing developers and organizations, providing services to people who are unhoused. The A New Way Home Project is a great example, and you heard about some other programs from my colleagues earlier today. The build out of the Coordinated Entry Program and Homeless Management Information System has hardwired the practice of providing services to people who are unhoused. hardwired practices that are fair and equitable, and provide data for analysis that didn't exist before. A tremendous accomplishment, both of those. The increase in affordable rental housing with goals for targeting homeless that surpassed the 15% goal in the roadmap that was from 6 or 7 years ago to now about 25%. I would ask that after 6 years, this is a good time to acknowledge not only what has been accomplished, but also what remains undone. What was missed then and remains important now? What have we learned that we should emphasize and invest in? Perhaps we should undertake a new project to revise the priorities and ideas of this roadmap so it's current to the problems of today. Here are some thoughts for your consideration. We should continue to increase opportunities for supportive housing with case management services to include more individuals, and not only for those with diagnosed mental health conditions. The new state Medicaid plan provides the opportunity to take on this expansion. We'll be hearing more about that in the future, but matching funds from the state are required to expand that supportive housing program. This report was silent on the changes needed at state and local levels that hindered the development of affordable housing and workforce housing. These regulatory barriers must be removed. Both incentives and penalties should be considered. Legal action is certain to follow with unknown consequences if we don't take this on at both the state and municipal levels. The report by 3 regional planning organizations in the Upper Valley called Keys to the Valley is a tremendous blueprint for how towns can encourage development while not losing their character. Included in solutions around supply of housing, more focus on manufactured homes and tiny homes should be added to bring down the price points of adding new units of housing, which is astounding and terrible. In services to people who are unhoused, the use of pods for temporary housing is now being tried in Burlington, could provide a model for future development that isn't reliant on motels. Much to be learned, we should pay attention. A technical detail, but an important one, if there are opportunities to support changes to the fair market rent, federal standards, and higher rent rural areas of the state through regulatory changes, we should seize on that opportunity. It is now being considered in Washington. We should have the support of the state. The increasing rents in the Upper Valley make it difficult to find units that meet the FMR threshold, which is set at levels that don't correspond to market rates. And we heard about the time limits that sometimes people lose vouchers because of that. Additional funding for shelter expansion projects, upgrades, and more complete funding of shelter operations. Too much of our operating budgets to provide shelter need to be raised from private funds. This should not be. And additional funding will help us hire and retain the staff who are dedicated to this work, but need to have the housing level wages. Thank you so much for this time. I encourage you to consider all that was said, and good luck in the future. I'll be happy to provide any comments anytime that would be helpful to your work.
Thank you, Michael, and make sure you send your remarks to us electronically so we can have them on the record. And thank you for the work of the Upper Valley Haven. You are, have been a multifaceted service organization in that vicinity, and I appreciate your work there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Committees, thank you for your patience and for your listening to this. We have, there will be not the conventional vigil that some of us have experienced in the past, but there will be some folks out on the front steps at noon from Washington County commemorating this day as well. Human Services Committee, I'd like to pass them. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, everybody who is watching. Representative Wood.
Thank you, Representative Stevens. I just want to extend our thanks to the people who were here today, particularly those with personal stories that they were sharing and understanding how intimidating it can be to appear before the legislature. And your stories mean a great deal to us and make a significant impact. And I also want to extend our thanks to the people who are providing supports and services in the community and the folks who spoke here today with regard to that role. Without those supports and services, I think we heard from the individuals themselves that that their journey is and would be much more difficult. So thank you to those folks as well. And this is going to be an ongoing conversation during this session, and we appreciate very much the time that you spent with us here today. So thank you.
And with that, I guess Representative Wood, our committees represent two of the legs of the stool, and so we will continue to work together in trying to get these policies passed, whatever we can accomplish this session. So thank you, committee, for joining us today, and we will see you soon.